Yo no, this is 11, 1, 15, 11. Yo no jugo pavana etya duranta kricharad. Dervasasori rachitad atyutagrabhog yaha. Sakana shishtam upayuja yatastrilokim. Triptam amasta salide vinimagna sangaha. Translation: during our exile, Durvasa Muni, who eats with his 10,000 disciples, intrigued with our enemies to put us in dangerous trouble. At that time, he, Lord Krishna, simply accepted the remnants of food, saved us. By his accepting food, thus, the assembly of Munis, while bathing in the river, felt sumptuously fed, and all the three worlds were also satisfied. And purport a little biography of Durvasa Muni. The whole thing is Durvasa Muni. Durvasa Muni, a powerful mystic Brahmana, determined to observe the principles of religion with great vows and under strict austerities. His name is associated with many historical events, and it appears that the great mystic could be both easily satisfied and easily annoyed, like Lord Shiva. When he was satisfied, he could do tremendous good to the servitor, but if he was dissatisfied, he can bring about the greatest calamity. Kumari Kunti, at her father's house, used to minister all kinds of services to great brahmanas, and being satisfied with her good reception, Durvasa Muni benedicted her with a power to call any demigod she desired. It is understood that he was a plenary incarnation of Lord Shiva, and thus he could be either easily satisfied or annoyed. He was a great devotee of Lord Shiva, and by Lord Shiva's order, he accepted the priesthood of King Shvetaketu because of the king's performance of sacrifice for 100 years. Sometimes he used to visit the parliamentary assembly of the heavenly kingdom of Indradev. He could travel in space by his great mystic powers, and it is understood that he traveled a great distance through space, even up to the Vaikuntha planets, beyond material space. He traveled all these long distances within 1 year during his quarrel with King Ambarish, the great devotee and emperor of the world. Paragraph. He had about 10,000 disciples, and wherever he visited and became a guest of the great Kshatriya kings, he used to be accompanied by a number of followers. Once he visited the house of Duryodhana, the enemy of Maharaj Yudhisthira. Duryodhana was intelligent enough to satisfy the Brahmana by all means, and the great Rishi wanted to give some benediction to Duryodhana. Duryodhana knew his mystic powers, and he knew also that the mystic Brahmana, if dissatisfied, could cause havoc, and thus he designed to engage the Brahmana to show his wrath upon his enemy cousins, the Pandavas. When the Rishi wanted to award some benediction to Duryodhana, the latter wished that the chief among all that he should visit the house of Maharaj Yudhisthira, who was the eldest and chief among all his cousins. But by his request, he would go to him after he had finished his meal with the queen Draupadi, Yudhisthira. Duryodhana knew that after Draupadi's dinner, it would be impossible for Maharaj Yudhisthira to receive such a large number of Brahmana guests, and thus the Rishi would be annoyed and would create some trouble for his cousin, Maharaj Yudhisthira. That was the plan of Duryodhana. Durvasa Muni agreed to this proposal, and he approached the king in exile, according to the plan of Duryodhana, after the king and Draupadi had finished their meals. Paragraph. On his arrival at the door of Maharaj Yudhisthira, he was at once well received, and the king requested him to finish his noontime religious rites in the river, for by that time the foodstuffs would be prepared. Durvasa Muni, along with his large number of disciples, went to take bath in the river, and Maharaj Yudhisthira was in great anxiety about the guests. As long as Draupadi had not taken her meals, food could be served to any number of guests. But the Rishi, by the plan of Duryodhana, reached there after Draupadi had finished her meals. Paragraph. When the devotees are put into difficulty, they have an opportunity to recollect the Lord with rapt attention. So, Draupadi was thinking of Lord Krishna in that dangerous position, and the all-pervading Lord could at once know the dangerous position of his devotees. He therefore came there on the scene and asked Draupadi to give whatever food she might have in her stock. On her being so requested by the Lord, Draupadi was sorrowful because the Supreme Lord asked her for some food, and she was unable to supply it at that time. She said to the Lord that the mysterious dish which she had received from the sun god could supply any amount of food if she herself had not eaten. But on that day, she had already taken her meals, and thus they were in danger. By expressing her difficulty, she began to cry before the Lord, as only a woman would do in such a position. The Lord, however, asked Draupadi to bring up the cooking pots to see if there was any particle of foodstuff left, and on Draupadi's doing so, the Lord found some particle of vegetable sticking to the pot. The Lord at once picked it up and ate it. After doing so, the Lord asked Draupadi to call for her guests, the company of Durvasa. Paragraph. Bhima was sent to call them from the river. Bhima said, "Why are you delaying, sirs? Come on, the food is ready for you." But the Brahmanas, because of Lord Krishna's accepting a little particle of food, felt sumptuously fed even while they're in the water. They thought that since Maharaj Yudhisthira must have prepared many valuable dishes for them, and since they were not hungry and could not eat, the king would feel very sorry, and so it was better not to go there. Thus they decided to go away. Paragraph. This incident proves that the Lord is the greatest mystic, and therefore he is known as Yogeshwara. Another instruction is that every household must offer food to the Lord, and the result will be that everyone, even a company of guests numbering 10,000 will be satisfied because of the Lord's being satisfied. That is the way of devotional service. Interesting lesson. The Bhaktivedanta Purport saying, by making offerings to the Lord, everyone is satisfied. Now, what does that mean? Everyone is satisfied could mean they don't want to eat because they offer to the Lord. And that's what happened in this case. They didn't go back because they were feeling full. So when people similarly, when people make offerings to their altar or to the deity on the altar, then what? Is the Lord, because the Lord is satisfied, the devotee, they used to serve the Sunday feast, you don't offer anything. Well, we offer to the deity. We didn't prepare for everybody, we prepared for the deity, and the deity was satisfied, so see you next week. And so obviously it doesn't mean that. Well, if it doesn't mean that, then what does it mean? Everyone is satisfied. In one sense, that the spiritual satisfaction brings satisfaction. Spiritual satisfaction doesn't depend upon the audience, but satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead doesn't mean the material satisfaction of persons that aren't on the spiritual platform, but persons on the spiritual platform. By nice worship, let's say, for example, one deity, a celebrated deity in Vrindavan, your picture on your phone shows the picture of Radharaman. And the worship of Radharaman is done so nicely that you don't have to take remnants of whatever it is that's been offered to the deity of Radharaman. Just seeing the deity and how nicely the deity is worshipped and so forth and so on. And it has been going on for eons, since Radharaman manifested. Not eons, but since Radharaman manifested before Gopal Bhatta. That very, very same standard of worship that goes on and goes on and goes on. And anyone that comes to take darshan of Radharaman is feeling happiness. Supposing you're remote, you don't go to have darshan of Radharaman. Knowing how nicely Radharaman is worshipped, and there's, of course, I can give other examples and other examples, but the satisfaction knowing that Radharaman is very nicely worshipped. And you can take that principle and apply it anywhere. And that's the meaning. For those that are looking for material satisfaction, that doesn't bring material satisfaction. But it brings spiritual satisfaction for those who are knowers of that the fact that the Lord is served very nicely on the spiritual platform and with devotion, true devotion. So one becomes satisfied. The senses become satisfied. Now, satisfied doesn't mean, now I know that Radharaman are nicely served, so I don't need to go to the temple or don't need to take darshan of Radharaman because I just know that he's satisfied. That the satisfaction, spiritual satisfaction, knows no limit. Now that's just taking one of the phrases in this whole section. Let's back up. Durvasa Muni. The history of Durvasa Muni becoming manifest, to begin with, goes back to two devotees, Anasuya and Anasuya's husband, they underwent austerities for a long time. And this personality of God had appeared, and he made a commitment to them. As their son, they wanted the manifestation of the personality of God, and so he agreed to become, because there wasn't, which form of the Lord was not specified. So he agreed to become three offspring. One Vishnu, one Brahma, one Shiva. So in this way, partial incarnation of Vishnu, partial incarnation of Brahma, partial incarnation of Lord Shiva. And the partial incarnation of Lord Shiva was Durvasa Muni. The partial incarnation of Lord Shiva was Durvasa Muni, Anasuya, and name just escapes me at the moment. I can't remember. You can look it up. You've got your magic device there.
Atri.
Huh?
Atri.
Atri Muni. Atri Muni. Exactly. Atri Muni. Atri Muni. Dattatreya was the partial incarnation of Lord Shiva. Dattatreya. And the partial incarnation of Lord Brahma. See if your computer tells you the answer. So Dattatreya, Durvasa Muni, and we'll come up with it in a moment. So that's how he appeared. And then after his Durvasa Muni's appearance, he underwent, as it says, he underwent extreme austerities.
Soma.
Huh?
Soma.
Soma. Soma, S-O-M-A. Okay. So he underwent severe austerities, worshipping Lord Shiva. And, Lord Shiva was very pleased. And so because he's already a partial incarnation of Lord Shiva wanted to offer him benedictions. And so he had this penchant tendency to travel here and there as a celibate, mendicant, sannyasi. So a brahmana, not only by birth as the son of Atri and Anasuya, but by quality. So he lived the life of a brahmana and the life of a mendicant brahmana. And he went here and there and had followers. 10,000 followers was common. Some numbers also mentioned, sometimes 60,000, but large number of followers. And when Durvasa Muni was in town, everyone was, look out, because he was known to get ticked off. And when he was ticked off, some terrible thing could happen. And sometimes terrible things happened. But when served nicely, then wonderful things happened. Because of what we've been doing. So one time he visited in Vrindavan. Durvasa Muni visited Vrindavan. And when the nice story, because of how nicely Radharani and the gopis served Durvasa Muni, Durvasa Muni gave Radharani a benediction, two benedictions. Whoever would eat his cooking would not become ill. Their health would be preserved and protected by eating her cooking. And the second was, whatever she prepared, it would never be the same twice, and it would always be very delicious. So this is when Radharani was a young girl, and the gopis were young girlfriends. So that when Radharani came back and informed her mother and father what happened today out in the field, they, because of their close friendship with Nanda and Jasoda, they informed Nanda and Jasoda. So then Nanda and Jasoda, particularly Yasoda, requested that Radharani could please come and cook for Krishna every day, because then he would not get ill. And everything would be wonderful because the benediction of Durvasa Muni. So in other words, Durvasa Muni had a role to play in many features of life, including in Vrindavan. And other situations, there are many Durvasa Muni histories. So here's one. When he came to Hastinapur, Duryodhana had the presence of mind to serve him very, very, very carefully and very nicely. And being pleased, then he was ready to give benediction. The benediction was, I have some cousin brothers. They're in the forest. And could you visit them? And when you visit them, be sure to come at a time when it's in the evening. He didn't say why, but the why was because of this Akshaya Patra, or magic pot, that could supply unlimited edibles out of one pot, unlimited edibles for any number of people of any variety. It's a magic pot. Thus Akshaya Patra, a magic pot. With the condition, this is from the sun god to Yudhisthira, who underwent austerities, knowing they're going into the forest and persons would visit them and they would have no means of receiving them by proper dharma. A guest to your home should be received in a proper manner. And how can we receive them if we can't prepare, because we're living like mendicants? So by worship of the sun god provided this magic pot with this condition. After Draupadi ate her meal, the pot wouldn't produce for the rest of that day. Now here repeatedly Prabhupada is saying meals. So the final meal of the day, she had already eaten. Durvasa Muni meticulously requested Durvasa Muni to go after Draupadi had eaten. He didn't say exactly when, but the time of day. He knew the pattern of when the Pandavas would have their meal and when Draupadi would have her meal and when she would be in desperation to feed anyone because she'd already had her meal. So the rest of the narration is here. Durvasa Muni appeared with his 10,000 followers, or some number of followers. Before taking his meal, he wanted to do, and here it said he was requested by Yudhisthira, in either case, to do his midday or evening rituals in the sacred river, bathing in the river, and then coming to the side of the river, etc. And he was gone for a long, long, long time. So what to do? Draupadi immersed herself in thought of Krishna. Krishna appeared, and what's the problem? And the explanation given here, Prabhupada is saying, she cried because she had eaten and she can't serve the guests, and Durvasa Muni gets angry. Some terrible consequence. So with her tears, this is celebrated pastime. Many devotees know the pastime inside and out. When she cried, he said, go to the pot and see if you can find something in the pot. She said, I already emptied the pot. Go look again. She found it specifically. The narration says she found some spinach. Here it says she found a vegetable. Spinach is a vegetable. And she gave that to Krishna. When Krishna ate that little spinach, he was fully satisfied. Patram pushpam palam toyam, etc. And because he was fully satisfied, Durvasa Muni and his 10,000 followers became fully satisfied. And so their hunger was dissipated. So they didn't come back to have their meal. Embarrassed that if they come back to have their meal, Yudhisthira will have made some elaborate arrangements and we won't eat anything because we're already full. So Duryodhana's wickedness was spoiled. And that's what the comment is in the verse. I'll read the verse again. During our exile, Durvasa Muni, who eats with his 10,000 disciples, intrigued with our enemies to put us in dangerous trouble. Now, this indicates he had an ill motive. He intrigued with our enemies to put us in dangerous trouble. There's no indication in the Mahabharata that it was part of a conspiracy. He just gave a benediction, because the Mahabharata narration is the way it's described in the purport. Durvasa Muni made this request from the benediction after his having pleased Durvasa Muni. Go visit my cousins. There's no indication in Mahabharata, I'll say it third time, that there was a conspiracy against the Pandavas, because Duryodhana was ill-motivated, and Durvasa Muni was not an ill-motivated person. He was easily angered. Ashutosh, easily pleased, easily angered. But his anger was coming from his Ashutoshness, not from a conspiracy. At least that's the Mahabharata version. And here it doesn't give any detail, it just says intrigued with the Pandavas, the Kauravas, to put the Pandavas in difficulty. But the history is very similar as described here also in Mahabharata. At that time, Lord Krishna simply by accepting the remnants of food saved us. By his accepting food thus, the assembly of Munis while bathing in the river felt sumptuously fed, and all the three worlds were also satisfied. Then comes this other question. What does that mean? You make a nice offering to Krishna on your altar, and necessities of life, considerations for all the people of the world are satisfied. They don't need to eat. Just make nice offerings to your deity or to Krishna. We went through that. That's not the meaning, obviously. But all the worlds are satisfied. It's that, the classic, by watering the root of the tree, all the parts of the body of the tree are nourished by that water given to the root of the tree. That's the explanation, or the parallel explanation. There, everyone is satisfied spiritually. And in this case, it's immediately, but in other cases, it's eventually. So with that confidence, we engage in devotional service to Krishna, because that's the panacea for the suffering of this age of Kali, of different varieties of suffering. There's lots of suffering. But it's lots of suffering continuing and escalating. Does it mean the devotional service principle isn't working? It means prolonged, and it also means purity. So, for example, by the influence of our founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada, and traveling here and there, people's lives were transformed. Not only instantly, like when you eat, you instantly feel satiated of your hunger or appetite, but in course of time, many persons became highly impacted, and then up till today, many persons being impacted by the contact with the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust and his publications in different languages around the world and so forth. So that's the similarity. And the back to the context, this is Arjuna reporting to Krishna that Krishna had left and feeling smashed because Krishna had left. And Yudhishthira asking him what happened. And then he describes all these wonderful glories of Krishna that fill his mind and his heart. And as he's narrating specifically, narrating the part of Krishna's instructing him on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, the anxiety, the negative emotion phenomena is dissipated. One can assume it's progressively dissipated because these are very nice meditations upon Krishna by someone who had direct experience of them. Not storybook, but direct experience. Because Arjuna is such a great devotee. Hare Krishna. Any thoughts or comments? Go ahead.
There are a few online.
Okay.
You can start with them.
Go ahead.
How is the relationship of Draupadi with Krishna? What is her consciousness when she approaches Krishna in calamities? I am trying to understand her relation and consciousness.
Well, it's implied in the situation. She, her mood was that of a pure devotee. She lived the life of a pure devotee, and she became the married wife of 5 pure devotees, 5 dear to Krishna pure devotees. So her mood was feeling herself dear to Krishna as her 5 husbands were dear to Krishna, and she felt that directly to Krishna. And there are a number of circumstances, so one can assume that she was always in that disposition, and we know explicitly there were some very trying circumstances when she couldn't sort out what to do in those trying circumstances. And her intensification of shelter-taking resulted in Krishna doing amazing things, verifying that Krishna is there to protect his devotees. So back to the question, her position is that of a pure devotee. It's different, but similar to the position of Queen Kunti, who is a pure devotee. And Draupadi is a pure devotee, certified pure devotee. And feeling very ultimately dependent upon Krishna and very close to him at all times. So whenever Draupadi was in difficulty, Krishna knew, and Draupadi knew what to do. She called to Krishna, and by calling to Krishna in this feeling of desperation, Krishna would come and manifest himself. Yes, Draupadi, what can I do for you? As a direct channel, and to which Krishna was responsive. And she knew that. That capacity was there, and she knew it wasn't her, it was the bhakti within her, and Krishna was pleased by that bhakti. And so she did, aside from the calamity situation, she did everything that she did for Krishna's pleasure, including being, the wife of 5 dear devotees of Krishna. So she wasn't indulging herself. She was being in relationship with Krishna's devotee, 5 pure devotee husbands, and at the same time for the pleasure of Krishna. That was her mood, because that was the question. She was manifesting the mood of devotion to Krishna through the mood of devotion to her husbands, because that's what Krishna wanted. Anything else online? No?
No.
Okay.
I have
You have something?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Along the same lines, I think in the previous question, Mataji was adding a little bit more to it that I'm trying to understand the principle that in all situations Krishna should be pleased. And my question is also along the same lines, more from a personal experience. At times, if I end up taking multiple services, I sometimes feel I don't do justice for all of them. I do one well, maybe not the other. Sometimes lack of focus, concentration, or time. Is Krishna pleased by the whole process?
Well, it's progressive, partial, not complete. He's pleased by the effort. And not the pleasure that Krishna is experiencing is not the same as the pleasure that Krishna experiences in exchange with the Pandavas, or in exchange with Draupadi, or in exchange with his associates in Mathura, Dwarka, and what to speak of Vrindavan. So but Krishna is pleased by the effort that's being made, and that when being pleased, he will help. He doesn't force, but if that's what we want, then Krishna will help. We can rely on that. We can rely on both of those things. Krishna will be pleased, partially at least, and he'll help us go further. That's our intention and our prayer.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. So 2 points I liked from this purport. First is that when the devotees are put into difficulty, they have an opportunity to recollect the Lord with rapt attention. And I also like that if you don't satisfy the senses of the Lord, and if you offend the devotees, then there will be consequences. And there are nice parallels between this verse and the last one, because we see that in both cases, Draupadi had tears in her eyes. She was offended and called out to Krishna in full surrender, and Krishna reciprocating to that degree of that calling, he immediately came. So it reminds me many times how Lord Krishna is. For example, when Gajendra offered the lotus from his trunk, he immediately came based on the level of surrender. So one question I have is, because in the last verse we could see that we could clearly understand the ill reaction suffered by the offending party. And in this case, Duryodhan and also Durasa Muni, I know you mentioned in Mahabharata, Durasa Muni was not actively conspiring, but what I feel is that because Duryodhan had planned this and he's going along with this. So, I mean, basically...
That's a presumption.
Okay.
That's not fair.
Okay.
Duryodhana, we have ample evidence that Duryodhana was wicked. We don't have ample evidence that Durvasa Muni was wicked.
Okay. Okay.
He was reciprocating. He was hot-tempered, but not, ill-motivated and manipulative like that. Because freely he gave and freely he cursed.
Okay. So in any case, I mean, the devotee was offended, Draupadi. So what was the ill consequence? Like who suffered and how?
In
this
what
manifested?
circumstance what he did wrong? What are you referring to?
Because
What's the incident that you're referring to?
I'm referring to the incident where Durvasa Muni is like he comes purposely right after Draupadi finishes her meal so that there'll be nothing to offer to him.
I forget the detail. I forget the detail of how it was arranged that the request of Duryodhana was fulfilled by Durvasa Muni, that is, come after she finished her meals, because commonly the wife, in this case Draupadi, would eat after her husband ate. So the detail of the time of day and how it was considered, I can't recall those details. There's probably some explanation, but I'll just repeat the point. My understanding is, it's not that Durvasa Muni, being a conspirer, specifically calculated when Draupadi would have taken her meal. Because who knows, she might have taken her meal just before taking rest. Who knows? But that was the request. So he's in Hastinapur, and they're off in the forest. So how long does it take to go through the forest to find where they are in the forest? That's not. I don't know if that's indicated anywhere. But that was the request, and so the request was fulfilled. But how the request was fulfilled might be by circumstance, it might be by conspiracy. I don't know of any evidence in Mahabharata that was conspiracy. So be careful.
Thank you, Guru.
You have something? Yes? No? Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki.